He seized her wrist to dominate her. She responded by breaking his hand without effort. The chamber doors slid open with a hiss, and I walked inside already certain of my victory. My name is Ambassador Korvath of the Kavaxi Imperium, and I had crushed weaker species across 40 star systems before this day. The humans were simply the next name on a long list. I had reviewed the file on them during my journey to the neutral station Concordia 7. Soft creatures, thin skin, short lives. A backwater world that had only reached the stars 300 years ago. My superiors had sent me here to remind them of their place, and I had every intention of doing exactly that. The meeting room was circular, lit by a pale blue glow from the ceiling. 6 other delegates from the Galactic Concord were already seated around the wide stone table. I recognized the Vraxian observer with her silver scales, the Tellurian envoy who never spoke unless asked a direct question, and the Pelorian advisor who served as the official record keeper for these proceedings. They all rose slightly as I entered. They knew what I was. They knew what my people could do. The Kavaxi stand 3 meters tall, our bodies covered in plates of natural armor harder than forged steel, and our reputation alone has ended wars before they began. Then I saw her. She was sitting at the far end of the table, and at first I almost did not notice her at all. She was so small, perhaps 1.5 meters in height, with dark hair pulled back from her face and pale arms resting easily on the table. She wore a dark blue uniform with a single silver pin on her collar. No armor, no weapons that I could see. She looked up when I entered and gave me a polite nod, the way one might greet a stranger on the street. There was no fear in her eyes. That, more than anything else, struck me as odd. Every species I had ever met showed fear when a Kavaxi entered the room. It was the natural order. It was correct. The Pelorian advisor cleared his throat and began the formal introductions. Ambassador Korvath of the Kavaxi Imperium, may I present Captain Helena Brooks of the Earth Coalition. She will be representing humanity in today's discussions. I lowered myself into the seat reserved for me, and the chair groaned under my weight. I let the silence stretch. This was a tactic I had used many times. Silence makes the weak nervous. They begin to fill it with words, and in their words they reveal their fears. I waited for Captain Brooks to start speaking, to stumble through some greeting, to show me her smallness. She did not speak, she simply waited. After perhaps 30 seconds, I found myself becoming irritated. The Vraxian observer shifted in her seat. The Tellurian envoy looked between us with growing discomfort. Captain Brooks remained still, her hands folded calmly, her gaze level. She was not staring at me. She was not avoiding me either. She was simply present the way a mountain is present, patient, untroubled. "Captain Brooks," I finally said, my voice deep and rough through the translator at her end of the table. "Your people are very fortunate to have been invited to these talks. The Concord does not extend such honors lightly." "We appreciate the invitation, Ambassador," she replied. Her voice was soft but clear. "We hope to be useful members of the community." "Useful," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "That is an interesting choice. Tell me, Captain, what exactly does your species offer that would be useful to a civilization as ancient as ours?" She tilted her head slightly. "That depends on what you need." I leaned forward, placing my forearms on the table. The polished stone shifted beneath my weight. "What we need, Captain Brooks, is for newcomers to understand their position. Your world has only had spaceflight for a few centuries. My people have ruled the Eastern Arm for 11,000 years. There is a hierarchy in the galaxy, and it is important that everyone learn where they fit within it." The Pelorian advisor coughed and tried to redirect the conversation toward the formal agenda. I ignored him. I had not come here for paperwork. I had come here to deliver a message. "With respect, Ambassador," Captain Brooks said, and there was no sharpness in her tone, only that same quiet calm. "Humans tend to find rigid hierarchies less useful than flexible cooperation. We've found that the most enduring relationships are built between equals." The word struck me like a physical blow. Equals. She had said it without hesitation, without softening it, without bowing her head. I felt the plates along my shoulders tighten in a way they had not done in years. The other delegates went very still. They knew what was happening. They had seen it before with other species in other rooms. Equals, I said slowly. An interesting word. Captain Brooks, do you understand what my people are capable of? Do you understand the size of our fleet, the reach of our influence? I have read the briefing materials, Ambassador. And yet you still speak of equality. I do. I rose from my seat. The chair scraped backward across the floor. The Pelorian advisor began to protest, but his voice seemed very far away. I walked slowly around the table. Captain Brooks watched me approach without moving. Her hands remained folded. Her breathing did not quicken. I could see the small rise and fall of her chest, slow and even, as if a 3-meter armored predator were not walking directly toward her. I stopped beside her chair. I looked down at her and she looked up at me, and her eyes were the color of a cold sea. In Kavaxi tradition, when one of higher rank wishes to remind one of lower rank of their place, there is a ritual gesture. We seize the wrist. It is not meant to harm. It is meant to communicate in a single moment the truth of the relationship. The strong holds the weak. The weak yields. The matter is settled. I had performed this gesture perhaps 100 times in my career, and not once had any creature failed to understand its meaning. I reached down and closed my hand around her wrist. Her wrist was so small inside my grip that my fingers overlapped easily. I could feel the warmth of her skin, the thinness of her bones. I expected her to gasp, to tense, to pull away in alarm. I expected to feel her pulse begin to race beneath my touch, the way prey responds when a predator finally closes the distance. She did none of those things. What happened next took less than a second, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to understand it. There was a movement so quick that even my warrior reflexes could not follow it. A shift of her shoulder, a turn of her hand, something her other hand did at the joint of my wrist. I felt my own arm rotating in a direction it was not meant to rotate. I heard a sound from inside my own body, a sound like dry wood cracking deep in a forest. The pressure plates that protected my hand splintered. The internal fluid lines ruptured. Pain, white and electric, surged up my arm and into my chest. I made a sound. I am ashamed, even now, to admit that I made a sound. It was not loud, but it was a sound, and every delegate in that room heard it. Captain Brooks released my hand. She had not stood up. She had not even fully turned in her chair. She folded her hands again, exactly as they had been before, and looked up at me with the same calm expression. "Please sit down, Ambassador," she said softly. "I think we have a great deal to discuss." I stood there swaying, looking at my ruined hand. The pale yellow fluid that kept my joints flexible was leaking onto the floor. My fingers hung at angles that were not natural. The pain was tremendous, but it was the smaller pain compared to the larger one. The larger pain was that I did not understand what had just happened. I had touched her, and she had broken something in me, and she had done it without effort, without anger, without even rising from her chair. I returned to my seat. I do not remember walking. I remember only sitting down and looking across the table at her, and seeing for the first time that I had no idea what I was looking at. The Pelorian advisor was speaking rapidly into his recording device. The Vraxian observer had not moved at all. The Tellurian envoy was staring at Captain Brooks with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was not surprise. It was something closer to recognition, as if he had suspected something for a long time and had just received confirmation. Captain Brooks waited until I had settled. Then she spoke again, in the same gentle voice she had used from the start. "I should mention, Ambassador, that I did not wish to do that. I prefer not to harm anyone, especially during a first meeting. But you placed your hand on me in a manner that, in our culture, would be understood as a serious threat. I responded with what we call the minimum necessary force. If I had used more, your arm would not be repairable. If I had used less, the message might not have been clear. I hope you understand." I tried to speak. My translator made a clicking sound and produced no words. "Take your time, Ambassador," she said. "We have all afternoon." I closed my eyes. I tried to breathe through the pain. I tried to think. I had reviewed the file on humans. I had read the descriptions of their physiology. I had memorized the statistics on their average size and strength. None of it had prepared me for what had just occurred. None of it had prepared me for the simple fact that this woman, this small, soft creature with her quiet voice and her folded hands, had broken my hand without rising from her chair, without showing fury, without any sign that she considered the act to be especially difficult. I opened my eyes. I looked at her. "Captain Brooks," I said, and my voice was hoarse. "I think there has been a mistake in my briefing materials." For the first time, she smiled. It was a small smile. It did not reach her eyes. "There often is, Ambassador," she said. "Shall we begin again?" I nodded. I could not do anything else. The Pelorian advisor was already preparing the formal documents. The Vraxian observer finally moved, very slightly, and I caught her glancing at the human with something that looked almost like pity. Pity for me, I realized. Pity that I had not known. The negotiations began. I do not remember the first hour of them clearly. My hand throbbed. My pride was somewhere on the floor, mixed with the yellow fluid. Captain Brooks spoke softly throughout, never raising her voice, never gloating, never even looking at my injury. She spoke about trade routes and cultural exchanges. She used words like partnership and mutual benefit. She quoted treaties I had never read. She referenced legal frameworks from 3 different conquered member species, all from memory. I tried to follow. I tried to keep up, but part of my mind kept drifting back to that single moment. The moment when I had reached for her wrist and the universe had turned upside down. When the session ended, Captain Brooks rose from her seat. She was still no taller than my chest. She walked around the table, past my chair, and paused beside me. I tensed, and I am not proud of that either. "There is a medical bay on level 4, she said quietly, only for me to hear. "They have experience with Kovacsy physiology. I have already sent ahead to let them know you are coming." She walked out of the room without waiting for my response. I sat there for a long time after the others had left. The chamber was empty. The pale blue light hummed softly above me. I looked down at my broken hand, and I thought about the briefing files my superiors had given me, and I thought about how confidently I had walked into this room only a few hours earlier. I thought about humans. And for the first time in my long career, I felt something I had never expected to feel about a species I had been told to dominate. I felt the cold weight of having been wrong. I did not go to the medical bay immediately. Pride is a slow thing to release, even when it has been broken alongside one's hand. I sat in the conference chamber for nearly an hour after the others had departed, listening to the soft mechanical hum of the station and trying to gather my thoughts. The pain in my arm had settled into a dull, throbbing rhythm that matched my pulse. Each beat reminded me of what had happened. Each beat reminded me that I did not understand it. Eventually, I rose and walked through the empty corridors of Concordia 7. The station was a neutral hub, designed by the older conquered species to provide diplomatic space for delicate matters. The hallways were wide enough to accommodate beings of many shapes and sizes. I passed Tellurians moving in their slow, dignified way, and a small group of Pelorians chattering quietly among themselves. They all stopped when they saw me. They saw my hand. Word, I realized, was already spreading. I found the medical bay on level 4 exactly where Captain Brooks had said it would be. The doors slid open at my approach, and a calm voice greeted me from inside. "Ambassador Korvath, we have been expecting you. Please come in." The physician was a Kovacsy. This surprised me. I had not expected to find one of my own kind here, in a neutral station so far from our home territory. He was older than me by perhaps 50 years, his plates dulled with age, his eyes the cloudy gold that comes with long service. He gestured for me to sit on a wide, reinforced bench, and I obeyed without protest. He examined my hand in silence. His tools were precise and well used. He had clearly treated injuries like this before, which raised a question in my mind. "Doctor," I said, "how often do you see this kind of damage?" He did not look up. More often than the Imperium reports admit, Ambassador. I let the silence stretch. He continued working. After a few minutes, he reached for a small canister and began to seal the broken plates with a quick bonding resin. This will hold for a week, he said. After that, you will need a proper repair at a specialist facility. The internal joints are damaged, but they are not destroyed. You were fortunate. Fortunate, I repeated. Yes, he met my eyes for the first time. Whoever did this could have taken your arm off entirely. They chose not to. That is a kind of mercy, Ambassador, even if it does not feel like one. I considered his words. Mercy. Captain Brooks had spoken of minimum necessary force. The doctor was saying the same thing in different words. I had been on the receiving end of restraint, and I had not even recognized it for what it was. Doctor, I said slowly, what do you know about humans? He set down his tools. He moved to a small console along the wall and tapped a series of commands. A wall display lit up, and rows of medical reports began to scroll past. Covaxi names, Covaxi injuries, all of them similar to mine, some worse. This is the unofficial casualty record from the past 8 years, he said. Ambassadors, military attaches, trade representatives, Covaxi who encountered humans and made the same assumption you did. The Imperium suppresses these reports. They do not want our people to know. I stared at the screen. There were more entries than I had expected, many more. Why, I asked, why would they hide this? The doctor sat down across from me. He folded his hands in a gesture I now recognized, because Captain Brooks had done the same thing earlier in the day. Because the truth is uncomfortable, Ambassador. Our entire culture is built on the principle that strength determines hierarchy. If a smaller, softer species can stand against us, then the principle is flawed. And if the principle is flawed, then much of what we have built our civilization upon must be reconsidered. The Imperium would rather suppress the evidence than confront the question. But the evidence is here, in your records. Yes, and I am not the only doctor who keeps such records. There are others on other stations in other systems. We share what we learn, quietly, among ourselves. I leaned back, the plates along my spine pressed against the cool metal of the bench. Doctor, I need to understand. What are humans? What did I miss in my briefing? He smiled faintly, though his eyes held no humor. Ambassador, the briefings are not wrong. They are simply incomplete. The numbers they give you are accurate. Humans are smaller than us. Their bones are less dense. Their natural armor is essentially non-existent. By every measure of raw physical comparison, they should not be a threat. And yet they are. The question is why? Tell me. He stood and walked to the display. He tapped again and the medical reports were replaced by a single image. It was a human hand. Simple, unremarkable. 5 fingers, soft skin, faint lines across the palm. This is what I find fascinating about them, Ambassador. Look at this hand. By itself, it is weak. It cannot crack a Covaxi plate. It cannot crush a Vraxian skull. It cannot do any of the things our hands can do. And yet, when this hand knows where to go and how to move, it can do things that are beyond our ability. Knows where to go, I repeated. Humans have studied their own bodies for thousands of years, not as scientists originally, but as artists, as philosophers, as practitioners of disciplines they call martial arts. These are systems of movement, balance, and leverage that have been refined by countless generations. A human child today inherits the accumulated knowledge of perhaps 50,000 years of organized self-defense. I thought about this. My own people had no equivalent. We had warriors, of course. But our combat traditions relied entirely on size and natural weaponry. Why would we develop systems of leverage and balance when our plates and our reach were always sufficient? We had never needed to think about how to move efficiently. We had simply moved, and the movement had been enough. They needed it, I said slowly, working through the thought. They were small and soft. They had no choice but to think about it. Exactly, Ambassador. Necessity is the mother of innovation, as they say on their world. The humans have been forced, throughout their entire evolutionary history, to outthink larger and stronger creatures. First the predators on their home planet, then each other. Then more recently, the various challenges of space. They have never had the luxury of relying on raw strength, and so they developed something more dangerous than strength. They developed precision. I looked down at my hand, sealed now in its temporary resin. I thought of how Captain Brooks had moved, the shift of her shoulder, the turn of her hand, something at the joint. It had not been a powerful blow. It had been a precise one. She had known exactly where my joint was weakest, exactly which direction to apply pressure, exactly how much force was needed and no more. She had used my own strength against me. My size, my weight, my forward motion as I reached for her, had all been turned into the tools of my own injury. "Doctor," I said. She did not seem angry. They rarely do. That is another thing the briefings fail to convey. Humans, in my experience, do not enjoy violence. Many of them find it deeply distasteful. They will go to remarkable lengths to avoid it. But when they decide it is necessary, they are extraordinarily efficient at it. They have a saying, "The best fight is the one that ends quickly." Captain Brooks ended your encounter in less than a second. That is not because she wished to humiliate you. It is because she wished to communicate clearly and then return to the actual work of the day. I considered this. In Kavaxi culture, a confrontation was an event. It had ceremony. It had meaning. It established hierarchy and identity. To humans, apparently, a confrontation was an interruption to be resolved as quickly as possible, like a spilled drink at a meal. The doctor seemed to read my thoughts. "There is one more thing you should understand, Ambassador. May I speak frankly?" "Please." The reason humans are dangerous is not their strength. It is not even their precision. It is their philosophy. They do not see themselves as the top of any hierarchy. They do not seek dominance for its own sake. When you reached for Captain Brooks, you did not communicate strength to her. You communicated something far more concerning. You communicated bad faith. You showed her in that single gesture that you would use force to settle disputes that should be settled with words. That is what she was responding to. She was telling you in her way that she has no interest in playing your game. I sat with this for a long time. The doctor did not press me. He returned to his tools and began to clean them, giving me space to think. "Doctor," I finally said, "may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "How long have you been here, on this station, treating injuries like mine?" 23 years. "And in that time, have you formed an opinion about humans, about what we should do regarding them?" He paused. He set down the tool he was holding. He turned to face me fully. "Ambassador, my opinion is this. The Kavaxi Imperium has spent 11,000 years building an empire on the principle that the strong rule the weak. We have grown comfortable. We have grown lazy in our thinking. We have stopped innovating because we have not needed to. The arrival of humans is the first real challenge our civilization has faced in many centuries. Not a military challenge, a philosophical one. They are forcing us to ask whether our entire way of seeing the universe might be wrong. And if it is, then we have a choice. We can pretend it is not. We can suppress the evidence, ignore the casualties, and continue as we have always done. Or we can adapt. We can learn. We can become something better than what we have been. But the choice will not wait forever. Eventually, the humans will spread further into conquered territory. Eventually, the weight of accumulated incidents will become impossible to hide. And when that day comes, the Imperium will either have prepared or it will not have. I rose from the bench. My hands still ached, but the resin had stopped the leaking, and I could move my fingers slightly. I owed this doctor more than I could express. "Thank you," I said, "for the treatment and for the honesty." He bowed his head slightly. "Travel carefully, Ambassador, and one more thing, if I may." "Yes." "The humans you will encounter in the coming days will treat you as if today never happened. They will be polite. They will be professional. They will not refer to your injury, and they will not gloat. This is not weakness. It is a kindness they extend to those who have been embarrassed. Do not mistake it for forgetfulness. They remember everything. They simply choose not to use what they know against you. That choice is theirs to make. Be worthy of it. I left the medical bay slowly. The corridors of Concordia 7 felt different now. The pale blue light overhead, the quiet hum of the air systems, the distant murmur of voices in other rooms. I had walked through these halls hours earlier as a representative of the Covaxi Imperium, certain of my place in the universe. I walked through them now as something less certain, something smaller, something that needed to learn. I returned to my quarters and sat on the edge of the sleeping platform for a long time. I called for the briefing materials again and read them more carefully than I had on the journey out. I noticed details I had missed before, references to human history, mentions of conflicts on their home world that had refined their methods over many centuries, notes about cultural practices that had survived when the practical need for them had passed. The information had all been there. I had simply not been reading carefully. I had assumed I knew what I was facing. The assumption had been my failure, not the briefing. I thought about Captain Brooks, her quiet voice, her folded hands, the way she had not flinched when I rose from my chair and walked toward her. She had known what she could do. She had known I did not. And she had given me every chance to back away before she demonstrated the difference. That night, I did not sleep well. My hand throbbed in time with my thoughts. I dreamed of a small figure in a dark blue uniform, sitting calmly at the end of a table, waiting for me to learn what I should have known before I ever entered the room. In the morning, I would face her again. The negotiations were not finished. There was still work to be done, agreements to be drafted, terms to be discussed. I had come to this station to dominate. I would now have to do something far more difficult. I would have to listen. The morning came with a pale, artificial dawn that filtered through the station's viewing panels. I rose slowly from the sleeping platform, my body aching in places that had nothing to do with my injured hand. The treated resin held firm, but every movement reminded me of what had happened the day before. I dressed in the simpler ceremonial robes of my office, rather than the heavy armored regalia I had worn for the first session. There was no point in pretending to be intimidating. The pretense had already been answered. When I entered the conference chamber, Captain Brooks was already seated. She wore the same dark blue uniform as the day before, her hair pulled back in the same style, her posture exactly as composed. She rose when I entered, which surprised me. The other delegates rose as well. It was a courtesy I had not expected, and certainly not one I felt I deserved. "Good morning, Ambassador," Captain Brooks said. "I trust you rested adequately." "As well as could be expected, Captain." "Please sit. We have a long day ahead of us." I took my seat at the table. The Pelorian advisor began arranging the day's agenda, and the Vraxian observer settled into her quiet, watchful posture. The Tellurian envoy gave me a slow nod that I read as something between sympathy and respect. Word had clearly traveled. Everyone in this room knew what had happened the day before, yet no one mentioned it. The doctor had been right about that. The first item on the agenda was trade routes. I had prepared a detailed proposal during my journey to the station, designed to lock humanity into a series of resource agreements that would benefit the Covaxi Imperium for at least the next 2 centuries. It was elegant work. I had been proud of it. Now, sitting across from Captain Brooks with my hand in its temporary seal, I found myself looking at the document with new eyes. The clauses were complicated. The language was carefully chosen to obscure rather than illuminate. The numbers were arranged in such a way that a hasty reader would miss the imbalances buried within them. I pushed the document across the table anyway. I had nothing else prepared. To withdraw it would be to admit weakness in front of every delegate present. Captain Brooks accepted the document with a small nod. She read it slowly. She did not skim. She read every line, every footnote, every appendix, and she read them in order. When she reached the end, she set the document down and folded her hands. "Ambassador, this is a thoughtfully constructed proposal," she said. Her voice was as gentle as it had been the day before. "I would like to walk through it with you, section by section, if you have time." "I have time, Captain." "Thank you. Let us begin with Section 3, Paragraph 4. The clause regarding heavy mineral extraction writes in the Pellerin Belt. The proposal grants the Covaxi Imperium exclusive harvesting access for 150 years. Could you explain the reasoning behind that particular term length? I had a prepared answer, of course. I gave it. I spoke about extraction infrastructure, return on investment, the long timelines required to establish proper mining colonies. My answer was technically accurate. It was also incomplete in a way I had hoped no one would notice. Captain Brooks listened patiently. When I finished, she nodded. That is a fair point regarding infrastructure costs, she said. However, I noticed that the Concord standard for similar arrangements is 40 years, with options to renew. I have here a copy of the Vraxian and Tellurian agreements signed 2 centuries ago, both for resources in similarly remote regions. Both followed the 40-year framework. I am curious why the proposal departs from that established standard. She slid 2 documents across the table toward me. I had not expected her to have them. I had certainly not expected her to have read them. I glanced at the Vraxian observer, whose expression did not change, though I thought I detected something in her eyes that had not been there a moment before. The situations are not identical, Captain, I said carefully. The Pellerin Belt presents unique challenges that warrant longer terms. Of course, Ambassador. Could you describe those unique challenges? I would like to understand them fully before we discuss whether the term length is appropriate. I tried. I gave the best answer I could, but the truth was that I did not have detailed information about the Pellerin Belt. I had relied on my advisors to fill in the technical details, and those advisors had assumed, as I had, that humanity would simply accept the proposal without close scrutiny. I found myself stumbling through generalities, and Captain Brooks listened to all of it, and she did not interrupt, and she did not look pleased or displeased. She simply absorbed what I said, and when I had finished, she nodded again. Thank you, Ambassador. Perhaps we can return to this section later, after I have had a chance to consult with my own technical staff. Shall we proceed to Section 4? We proceeded, and in Section 4 the same thing happened, and in Section 5, and in Section 6. Captain Brooks did not raise her voice. She did not accuse me of bad faith. She simply asked questions, one after another, each one more precise than the last. She referenced precedents I had not heard of. She quoted Concord legal philosophers I should have read but had not. At one point, she cited a treatise written by a Covaxi scholar 400 years ago, a work I had been required to study at the academy and had only skimmed. She quoted it from memory, and the quotation was perfectly accurate, and it directly contradicted a clause in my proposal. I felt slowly, the way a creature feels when it realizes it has wandered into territory it does not understand. Each question was reasonable. Each citation was correct. Each precedent was relevant. There was nothing I could object to, because there was nothing wrong with what she was doing. She was simply doing her job, very well, in a way that none of my advisors had prepared me for. The Vraxian observer began taking notes. The Pellorian advisor was already on his second recording crystal. The Tellurian envoy had not moved in nearly an hour, which I had come to understand was his way of paying close attention. Around midday, Captain Brooks suggested a break. I accepted gratefully. I needed time to think. I needed time to reconsider. As we rose from the table, a junior member of the Vraxian delegation, a young male who had been observing from a side bench, made a comment to one of his colleagues. He spoke in Vraxian, and he assumed the translators were not active. He was wrong. The room translators captured everything. The human punches above her weight class, he said, with a note of amused condescension. The room went still. Captain Brooks paused at the doorway. She turned slowly and looked at the young Vraxian. He realized his error. The color of his scales shifted ever so slightly toward a pale shade that I knew indicated embarrassment. Captain Brooks smiled. It was not a cold smile. It was somehow almost warm. "Counselor," she said, "humans do not have weight classes. We just have problems we have not finished solving yet." She left the room. I stood there for a long moment. The young Vraxian was looking at the floor. His superior was speaking to him in low, rapid tones. The Tellurian envoy was watching me, and when our eyes met, he gave the slightest of nods, as if he were saying, "You understand now, do you not?" I walked to the observation lounge on the upper level and stood by the wide window for a long time. Below me, the curve of the gas giant filled the view, banded in deep oranges and slow swirling browns. Somewhere out there, far beyond what I could see, was the home world of the humans, a small blue planet by all accounts, nothing remarkable about it. Yet from that small planet had come a species that, in only a few centuries, had spread far enough to sit at this table and speak to me as an equal. Not because they had outgrown us in size or in armor, but because they had outthought us. They had read our treaties. They had studied our histories. They had memorized our scholars. They had done, in 300 years, what we had failed to do in 11,000. I had thought of them as a backwater species. The truth was that they had treated us as homework, and they had completed it. When the negotiations resumed in the afternoon, I did something I had never done in my career. I withdrew my proposal. I withdrew it cleanly, without excuses, without face-saving language. I told Captain Brooks that upon further review, I believed the document required significant revision before it could form a useful basis for our discussions. I asked for an additional day to consult with my staff and prepare a revised version. Captain Brooks accepted this without comment. She did not mock me. She did not press her advantage. She simply nodded and said, "That seems wise, Ambassador. We will look forward to seeing the revised proposal tomorrow." And then, instead of moving on, she did something that surprised me deeply. She set aside her own prepared materials and asked me a question. "Ambassador, while we have time, would you be willing to tell me about Kavaxi cultural practices regarding negotiation? I have read the official sources, but I find that they often miss the nuances that an experienced practitioner would know. I would value your perspective." I stared at her. This was not a tactical move. This was not an attempt to gain advantage. She was, as far as I could tell, genuinely curious. She wanted to learn. From me. After everything that had happened, after I had walked into this room intending to grind her people under my heel, she was asking me to teach her. I began slowly to talk about Kavaxi traditions, the role of the long pause, the significance of the seating arrangement, the 7 layers of formal language and when each was appropriate. She listened with the same complete attention she had given to the proposal. She asked clarifying questions. She took notes on a small pad in handwriting that I noticed was extremely neat. When I described practices that seemed strange to her, she did not laugh or judge. She simply asked why and waited for the answer. The afternoon passed in a way I had not expected. I found myself talking more than I had intended. I found myself, somewhere along the way, beginning to enjoy the conversation. The other delegates, sensing something had shifted in the room, contributed their own observations. The Tellurian envoy, who rarely spoke, offered insights about diplomatic protocol that had clearly been sitting unused for years. The Pelorian advisor began sharing historical context with a kind of relief, as if he had been waiting for years to be asked. By the time the session ended, I realized something had changed. The room no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a workshop. Captain Brooks had transformed the entire tone of the negotiation, not through any dramatic gesture, but through the simple expedient of behaving as if mutual respect were the natural state of affairs, and anything else was an unfortunate temporary deviation. As we packed up our materials, Captain Brooks approached me. She moved with the same quiet, deliberate manner as always, and I noticed that I no longer flinched at her approach. She stopped beside my chair. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "I wonder if you might be willing to join me for a private conversation this evening. I find that the most productive parts of any negotiation often happen outside the formal sessions. Nothing official, just 2 representatives talking. I have a few questions I would value your perspective on, and I imagine you may have some questions for me." I considered her invitation. Every instinct of my training told me to decline. Private conversations carried risks. They could not be controlled. They left no record. But I had been trained by a tradition that had brought me to this room with a flawed proposal and a foolish assumption. Perhaps it was time to listen to a different instinct. I would be honored, Captain Brooks. There is a small observation lounge on level 6. It is rarely used. Shall we say 1900 hours? 1900 hours. She gave me a small nod and walked away. I gathered my materials slowly. The Vraxian observer paused beside me as she left the room and spoke a single sentence in low tones. Ambassador, in 20 years of attending these negotiations, I have never seen Captain Brooks invite a counterpart for a private conversation. You should consider this carefully. She continued on her way before I could respond. I returned to my quarters. I did not eat. I sat at the small desk by the window and looked out at the slowly turning stars beyond the station, and I tried to understand what was happening to me. 2 days ago, I had been an instrument of Imperium policy, certain and proud. Now I was a wounded ambassador with a withdrawn proposal, preparing to attend a private meeting with a woman who had broken my hand without rising from her chair, because some part of me, some part I did not yet fully understand, believed she had something important to teach me. I changed into clean robes. I reviewed my notes from the day's discussions, and at 1900 hours, I made my way to the observation lounge on level 6, alone, to see what the evening would bring. The observation lounge on level 6 was small and quiet, with curved windows that looked out over the slow rotation of the gas giant below. There were only a few seats, arranged in pairs to encourage conversation rather than presentation. Captain Brooks was already there when I arrived, standing by the window with her hands behind her back, watching the storms move across the planet's vast surface. She turned when she heard me enter and offered me a chair near the window. Thank you for coming, Ambassador. Thank you for the invitation, Captain. I lowered myself into the chair. It had been built to accommodate a wide variety of body types, and it held my weight comfortably. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the gas giant turn beneath us. I found that the silence was not uncomfortable. It was, in fact, the first comfortable silence I had shared with another being in some time. I owe you an apology, Captain, I said finally. She turned her head slightly. You owe me nothing, Ambassador. I do. I came to this station with the intention of dominating you and your people. I did not come here in good faith. The proposal I presented yesterday was designed to harm your interests in ways you would not notice until it was too late to refuse. I was not a partner. I was a predator. I am ashamed of what I came here to do. She considered this. She did not rush to comfort me, and I appreciated that. Forced reassurance would have insulted us both. I know you came here to dominate us, Ambassador. I read the same intelligence reports you did, just from the other side of the table. The proposal you presented was not a surprise. We had anticipated something similar. You anticipated it, and you said nothing. I said nothing because it would not have been useful. If I had announced what I knew at the start, you would have replaced your proposal with something more carefully constructed, and we would have spent days trying to disentangle a more sophisticated version of the same trap. By allowing you to present what you had prepared, I was able to address it directly. The result was the same, but the process was faster and clearer for everyone. I absorbed this. It was elegant. It was also slightly humbling, which was perhaps becoming a familiar sensation in her presence. Captain, may I ask you a question that has been troubling me since yesterday? Of course. When I reached for your wrist, you broke my hand. You did so with what I am told was the minimum necessary force. Why did you not simply refuse to touch me? Why did you not pull away? Why did you not call for security? She considered the question carefully before answering. The light from the gas giant played across her face, casting soft shadows that moved as the planet turned. Ambassador, in my culture, we have a saying. It is sometimes attributed to a soldier from one of our older wars. The saying is, the best response to aggression is the smallest one that ends the aggression. If I had pulled away, I would have communicated that I was afraid of you. That would have invited further attempts. If I had called for security, I would have communicated that I needed others to handle problems that involved me directly. That also would have invited further attempts. Both responses would have led, eventually, to a worse outcome than the one I chose. So you chose to break my hand. I chose to communicate in a way you could not misunderstand, that physical aggression toward me would not produce the results you were seeking. I chose the minimum action that would deliver that message clearly. Anything less would have been ambiguous. Anything more would have been cruelty. The precision was the point. I sat with this for a long moment. I thought about all the times in my career when I had used force and how rarely I had thought about it as communication. Force, to my people, was an end in itself. It established hierarchy. It settled questions. We did not think of it as a message that could be delivered with more or less skill, more or less restraint. We simply applied it and the matter was settled and we moved on. Captain, in my culture, we do not think this way. Force is force. We do not measure it. We do not refine it. We simply use it. I know, Ambassador. That is part of what I find interesting about your people. You have access to enormous power, and you have spent 11,000 years learning to apply it bluntly. We are a smaller people. We have spent the same time learning to apply our smaller power precisely. The two paths lead to very different places. They do indeed. May I tell you a story, Ambassador? Please. She turned more fully to face me. The light caught the silver pin on her collar and made it gleam. My grandmother lived through a war on our home world. Not a war between species, a war between humans. She was a young woman when it began, and she was an old woman when it ended. She survived things I will not describe to you, because the descriptions are not the point of the story. The point is what she said to me when I was a child, on the morning I was leaving home to begin my training as an officer. She paused, I waited. The silence stretched comfortably between us. She said, "Granddaughter, you are going to learn how to do many things. Some of them will be terrible. The world will tell you that strength is the answer to every problem. The world will be wrong. Strength is only an answer when you have first asked the right question. The right question is never how can I win? The right question is always what is worth doing. If you remember to ask the right question, you will use your strength wisely. If you forget, your strength will use you, and it will use you up, and there will be nothing left of you when it is finished." I felt something shift inside me as she spoke. It was a small shift, but it was real, the way a stone in a stream shifts after a long rain. The water finds a new path. The shape of things changes. Your grandmother sounds like a wise person, Captain. But she is gone now, but her words travel with me. I have never thought to ask the question she described. What is worth doing? In Kavaxi culture, the question is always different. It is always who is strongest. We assume that the answer to that question determines all the others. I know, Ambassador. That is why I think your people may be unhappy without realizing it. When you ask only one question, you can only receive one kind of answer, and that one kind of answer cannot satisfy a complete being. I looked out at the gas giant. The storms moved slowly across its surface, vast as continents, indifferent to anything that observed them. 11,000 years of Kavaxi history had been shaped by the question Captain Brooks had named. I had served that history. I had been proud to serve it. And yet, sitting here now, with my hands still aching from the lesson she had taught me, I could not deny that there was truth in what she said. We had grown stagnant. We had stopped innovating because we had stopped asking new questions. We had used our strength to maintain our position, and our position had become a cage we no longer recognized. Captain Brooks, may I ask you something else? Always, Ambassador. Why did you take this assignment? Surely your government has many qualified diplomats. Why send a captain who is, as I now understand, also a master of unarmed combat? Why send someone with your particular combination of skills? She smiled faintly. It was the first time I had seen her smile reach her eyes. Because my government anticipated that the Covaxi might attempt exactly what you attempted, Ambassador. Not necessarily in that exact form, but something. Some test. Some assertion of dominance designed to establish the relationship before the formal negotiations began. They wanted someone who could respond to such a test in a way that would not require the situation to escalate. Someone who could resolve it quickly, with minimum harm, and then continue with the actual work. They expected me to do what I did. They considered it a likely possibility. I want to be honest with you. We knew there was a significant chance that you would test us in some physical way. We prepared for it. We did not prepare to harm you. We prepared to demonstrate clearly and quickly that such tests would not produce the results you wanted. And if I had not tested you, then we would have proceeded directly to the negotiations, and you would have left this station with a treaty that did not contain the terms you wanted, and you would have gone home wondering what you had missed. Either way, the outcome would have been the same. The difference was in how much time it took, and how much pain you experienced along the way. I considered this. I felt no anger at her words. She was not gloating. She was simply explaining the truth, and the truth was that her people had read mine more accurately than mine had read hers. They had anticipated me. They had prepared for me, and they had handled me with such gentle precision that I was now sitting across from her, voluntarily, wanting to understand more. Captain, I would like to ask one more question, and then I would like to listen, if you are willing to keep speaking with me. Please, Ambassador. What do you want? Not your government, you, from these negotiations, from this entire encounter between our peoples. She thought about this for a long time. The gas giant turned beneath us. Somewhere in the station, a chime sounded faintly, marking the half hour. She finally answered. I want both of our peoples to be better than we are. I want the Covaxi to recognize that there is more to existence than dominance. I want humanity to recognize that strength, when we have it, comes with responsibilities we sometimes prefer to ignore. I want a Concord that is not built on hierarchy or on careful balances of fear, but on something more durable, mutual usefulness perhaps, or shared curiosity. I want our descendants, generations from now, to look back on this period and say that this was when things began to change, that this was when the old patterns started to break down and something better began to take their place. That is a large ambition, Captain. It is. I do not expect to see most of it fulfilled in my lifetime, but I think that is true of any ambition worth holding. We work toward things larger than ourselves, knowing we will not finish them because the work itself is what matters. My people do not think this way. I know, but you might. You individually. You came here to dominate us, and you are now sitting with me asking these questions. That is not nothing, Ambassador. That is the beginning of something. I felt then a strange warmth in my chest. It was not pride. Pride was what I had felt before I came to this station, and I knew the difference now. This was something quieter, something that did not need to be displayed. It was the feeling of being seen accurately by someone who had every reason to dismiss me, and who had chosen instead to take me seriously. We talked for another 2 hours. She asked me about my own history, about my hatchling years, my training, the experiences that had shaped me. I told her things I had not told anyone in many years. She listened to all of it with the same complete attention. At one point, I asked her about her own training and the discipline that had allowed her to break my hand. She demurred gently. She said that the discipline was less interesting than the principles behind it, and that we could discuss those another time if we both wished. When the conversation finally ended, we both rose to leave. She extended her hand to me, palm up, in a gesture I now understood to be entirely different from the one I had attempted with her. This was an offering, not a claim, an invitation to acknowledge each other, freely chosen, without pressure. I extended my own hand, the uninjured one, and laid it gently against hers. Her palm was warm. Her fingers were small and steady. I felt, beneath the surface, the steady rhythm of her pulse, and I marveled that something so apparently fragile could contain such strength, and use it so wisely. "Good night, Ambassador," she said. "Good night, Captain Brooks. Thank you for everything." I walked back to my quarters slowly. The corridors of the station were quiet at that hour. I passed almost no one. I let the conversation settle inside me, and as it settled, I felt something old and rigid in me beginning to give way. 11,000 years of cultural certainty were not undone in a single evening, but a crack had appeared. Light was getting through. In the morning, I would draft a new proposal, a real one built on the principles I had glimpsed tonight. My superiors would not like it. They might recall me. They might strip me of my title. None of that mattered as much as it would have mattered 3 days ago. What mattered was that I now had a choice I had not known I possessed, and I intended to make it. I lay down on the sleeping platform. I closed my eyes. I thought of a small woman with dark hair pulled back, sitting calmly at the end of a long stone table, waiting for the universe to grow into something larger than it had been. For the first time in many years, I slept deeply. The morning of the final session arrived, and I rose with a clarity I had not felt in a very long time. The plates along my back, which had been tense for years, felt loose. The dull weight of duty that I had carried since my first ambassadorship felt, for the first time, like something I could set down if I chose to. I dressed in the simplest robes I had brought, the ones reserved for private occasions rather than public ones. I no longer wished to perform my office. I wished only to do my work honestly. The conference chamber was full when I arrived. All the delegates had returned, and several additional observers had been permitted to attend. Word had spread, in the way that words always spread on stations like this. Something unusual was happening between the Covaxi and the humans. Other species wanted to see how it concluded. Captain Brooks was already in her seat. She gave me a small, warm nod as I entered. I returned it with one of my own. I had stayed up most of the night drafting the new proposal. My staff had been alarmed when I had instructed them to abandon the old document entirely and begin again from a different foundation. I had explained my reasoning briefly, and I had told them that any concerns they had should be directed to me personally, not transmitted home. They had complied, though I could see in their eyes that some of them feared I had lost my judgment. Perhaps I had, by the standards I had previously held. By new standards, I felt I had finally found it. I placed the new document on the table. Captain Brooks accepted it. She read it as she had read the previous one, slowly and completely, every line, every footnote, every appendix. As she read, the room remained quiet. The other delegates watched her face for any sign of how she was responding. She gave them nothing. Her expression remained calm and attentive throughout. When she reached the end, she set the document down and folded her hands. "Ambassador," she said, "this is a remarkable revision. I would like to ask several questions if I may." "Of course, Captain." We worked through the proposal together. The new document granted humanity equal terms in all major resource agreements. It established a 40-year framework for the Pellerin Belt, in line with Concord standards. It included provisions for joint research initiatives, cultural exchange programs, and a mutual defense clause that protected both our peoples without favoring either. It was, in every measurable way, the opposite of the document I had presented 2 days earlier. Captain Brooks asked her questions. I answered them as honestly as I could. Where the proposal had weaknesses, I acknowledged them. Where she suggested improvements, I accepted them when they were sound. The document grew stronger as we worked through it. By the time we had finished, several hours later, the proposal was no longer mine alone. It had become ours together. The Vraxian observer took more notes than I had ever seen her take. The Tellurian envoy spoke twice during the session, both times to offer constructive suggestions that improved the document further. The Pelorian advisor, who had spent his career recording the words of others, contributed a brief but thoughtful comment about historical precedents that strengthened the cultural exchange section. When the session paused for a meal, Captain Brooks rose and approached me. She did so as she always did, quietly and without fuss. "Ambassador," she said, "you have done something difficult. I want you to know that I notice." Thank you, Captain. Your superiors will likely not be pleased with what you have produced today. I expect they will not. What will you do if they recall you? I thought about this. I had considered the question myself, late in the night, while the new proposal had taken shape under my hand. I had reached an answer I had not expected. If they recall me, I will go home, Captain, and I will explain as best I can what I have learned here. I may not be able to convince them, but I will try. And if they decide that my service is no longer required, then I will retire and I will write. There is much I wish to say that I have never put into words. Perhaps it is time. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she gave a small nod. That is a good answer, Ambassador. Whatever happens next, please know that you have my respect. Not because of anything you came here to do, because of what you chose to do once you understood. The session resumed after the meal. By late afternoon, the new proposal was complete. The Pelorian advisor formalized it, and the witnesses signed the official record. The Vraxian observer, breaking with her usual silence, made a brief statement for the diplomatic archives. She said that the negotiation between the Kavaxi Imperium and the Earth Coalition had been one of the most instructive she had witnessed in her career, and that she would be recommending its proceedings as a study text for future Concord trainees. I thought I detected, in the slight adjustment of her scales, something that looked almost like satisfaction. When the formal session ended, the delegates filed out one by one. Captain Brooks remained behind, gathering her notes. I lingered as well. There was one more thing I needed to do before I left this station. Captain Brooks. Yes, Ambassador. I would like to send a message home, a personal one to my superiors. I have been thinking about what to say all day. May I ask your honest opinion of what I have drafted? She nodded. I produced the small data slate on which I had been composing the message and handed it to her. She read it carefully, as she read everything. The message was short. It was the report I owed to the Imperium High Council, written in plain language, without the ornate framing that usually accompanied such documents. It said that I had come to this station with the intention of dominating a species I had been told to consider lesser. It said that I had been wrong about them in ways I would spend the rest of my life understanding. It said that the humans were not stronger than the Kavaxi in raw terms, and were not weaker either, but were something different. They were a people who had learned to ask better questions than we had, and to act on the answers they found, with patience and precision, and a thoughtful kind of restraint. It said that the Kavaxi Imperium had spent 11,000 years asking who is strongest, while the humans had spent the same time asking what is worth doing. One of those questions, I wrote, has an answer that does not change. The other has a future that grows. I recommended, with the full weight of my office, that the Imperium begin to learn from the humans, while the humans were still patient enough to teach. I closed by offering to resign my position if my superiors found the recommendation unacceptable. Captain Brooks read the message twice. When she set the slate down, her eyes were thoughtful. Ambassador, this is an honest message. I cannot tell you whether your superiors will accept it. I do not know your government well enough to predict that. But I can tell you that the message itself is well written, and that the position you take in it is one I would be proud to defend if I were in your place. Thank you, Captain. May I ask one favor of you before you send it? Anything within my power. If you are recalled, and if you do retire, please write to me. I would value your continued correspondence, not as captain to ambassador, as one person to another who shared a difficult and important conversation and who learned something together. I would be honored, Captain Brooks. Helena, she said, and smiled gently. When we are not in formal session, you may call me Helena. Corveth, I replied. When we are not in formal session, you may call me Corveth. We exchanged contact codes. She gave me hers without hesitation on a small printed card. I gave her mine. The small ritual of the exchange felt, in a way I could not fully articulate, more meaningful than any treaty I had ever signed. The next morning, I prepared to depart. The station's administration had arranged a small farewell ceremony, brief and dignified, in the central plaza. The delegates from the negotiation were all present, along with several station officials. I made a short speech. I thanked everyone for their patience and their professionalism. I expressed my hope that the agreement we had drafted would mark the beginning of something useful for both our peoples and for the wider Concord. I did not speak of the personal journey I had undergone. That belonged to me alone, and to the woman standing at the edge of the gathering with her hands folded in front of her. When the ceremony concluded, I made my final farewells. The Vraxian observer surprised me by extending a formal acknowledgement of respect, a gesture rarely offered between species. The Tellurian envoy spoke to me at length for the first time, sharing observations about the negotiation that he said he had not felt comfortable expressing during the formal sessions. The Pelorian advisor presented me with a copy of the official record, bound in the traditional manner of his people, with a personal inscription on the inner cover wishing me safe travels and a long career. Helena was the last to approach. She did so quietly as always. "Corveth, Helena, I have something for you. It is small." She handed me a folded piece of paper. I opened it. It was a handwritten note in her neat script. The words were simple. "The right question is never how can I win. The right question is always what is worth doing." "It is what my grandmother said to me," she said quietly. "I thought you might wish to carry her words with you." I closed the paper carefully and tucked it inside the inner pocket of my robe, against my chest. "I will carry them, Helena, for the rest of my days. Travel safely, Corveth. And you, Helena." I boarded the diplomatic vessel that would carry me home. I stood at the observation window as the station fell away behind us, slowly shrinking against the curve of the gas giant. I thought about everything that had happened in the past several days. The arrogant ambassador who had walked into the conference chamber a few mornings ago felt very far away from the being I had become. He felt, in fact, like a stranger I was glad to leave behind. The journey home took 12 days. I spent most of it writing. I composed the formal report, of course, the one my superiors required. I also composed a longer, more personal account of the negotiation, intended as a record for myself. And I began, tentatively, to draft a longer work, a kind of memoir about my career and what I had learned from this single encounter that had changed everything. I did not know whether I would ever publish such a work. I did not know whether I would even finish it. But the writing itself felt important. It felt like a way of honoring what had happened. When I arrived at the Imperium capital, I was summoned to the High Council immediately. They had received my message. They had received the treaty. They were not pleased. The hearing was long and difficult. Several council members spoke harshly to me. They accused me of weakness. They accused me of having been manipulated. They demanded explanations for clauses they considered concessions, and they did not accept my explanations. I bore their words with as much patience as I could find. I did not argue. I did not become defensive. I simply restated calmly and clearly what I had observed and what I had concluded. In the end, the council did not formally censure me, nor did they fully endorse what I had done. They placed me on what they called administrative review, which meant, in practice, that I would not be assigned to another major negotiation for the foreseeable future. They also indicated, through unofficial channels, that I should consider whether retirement might be appropriate. I considered it. I considered it for several weeks, and then I submitted my retirement papers voluntarily with no bitterness and no regret. I built a small house on the coast of my home territory, in a region where the sea winds blew strong and the cliffs rose tall against the sky. I wrote every morning and walked along the cliffs every afternoon and corresponded regularly with Helena. Her letters arrived monthly on the diplomatic courier. Mine traveled back the same way. We discussed everything: politics, philosophy, the books we were reading, the small details of our daily lives. She wrote about her work with the Earth Coalition, which had expanded after our negotiation. I wrote about the slow process of trying to articulate, in a language designed for dominance, ideas that did not depend on dominance. Years passed. The treaty we had drafted held. Other Covaxi diplomats watching my fate learned cautious lessons from it. Some of them began quietly to consider whether the old patterns might need revision. The Imperium did not change quickly. Empires never do. But the cracks I had felt in myself that night on Concordia 7 began to appear gradually in the larger structure of my civilization. Small cracks, then larger ones, then eventually real change. I did not live to see all of it, but I lived to see the beginning, and the beginning was enough. The book I wrote was published, eventually, by a small press in a quiet province. It did not become famous. It was read, however, by the people who needed to read it. Young diplomats, junior officers, hatchlings who would grow into adults in a world slightly different from the one I had known. The book carried Helena's grandmother's words on its dedication page, translated carefully into the Covaxi tongue. The right question is never how can I win. The right question is always what is worth doing. I think often, even now in my late years, of that single morning in the conference chamber, of the moment I reached for her wrist, certain of my place in the universe, of the moment afterward when the universe answered me with a precision I had not imagined possible, of the woman who had broken my hand without rising from her chair and who had then offered me her own, palm up, in a gesture of equality I had not deserved and could only learn to grow worthy of. I had walked into that room as a predator. I had walked out of it as a student. It was, I now believe, the best thing that ever happened to me. The end.